The Prime Minister is trying to win some fans back with plans to increase home ownership. So, as the average house price reaches a record £289,099, Boris Johnson wants to extend the right to buy scheme, where those who are renting from housing associations can buy their homes at a discounted price. So the PM will also suggest that allowing those on housing benefits to use taxpayer money to pay off a mortgage is a good idea. This, of course, comes as he is urged to cut taxes to win favour back with members of his own party. Well, who better to have a chat with me about this than the one and only, the man himself, Tom Harwood, our political correspondent. Thank you very much, Tom. Look, I think just to explain to people really what's going on here.
Well, there was, I think, in order to contextualise what's happening today, we need to look at what happened on Monday.
OK.
And, of course, the Prime Minister faced a pretty seismic vote of confidence in him, and, indeed, those who voted no confidence reached the number of 148. Now, looking at that broad coalition of people who opposed the Prime Minister, it wasn't all about parties. It wasn't all about wine and cheese. That opened the door to this sense of frustration that many MPs have had over the last year and a half, 2 years of this government. The U-turns, indeed the pressure placed upon it, the lack of clear direction. And to some extent, Number 10's calculation here is the way to win back some of those who have lost faith in the Prime Minister's leadership is to try and provide a greater sense of direction, of vision, and of steadfastness. So today, we're expecting to hear a policy blitz, or at least the beginning of a policy blitz, where the Prime Minister will set out the areas in which he wants to see his government move faster to enact change. We're going to see some broad brushstrokes today, some areas of policy detail, for example, on housing, but more so pointing to where more will be announced over the coming days and weeks. We're expecting, for example, maybe next week, but probably looking more likely in 2 weeks' time now, a big announcement on the economy as well.
Yeah, so Boris Johnson now, obviously, after the events of Monday, is his plan, as far as you're aware, to kind of reinvent himself like Madonna?
I think to some extent he has been a victim of events for the last 2 years. His premiership got going with huge goodwill. He delivered a speech in February 2020 in Greenwich, which received huge praise, which was about sort of setting the course of his government, one that spoke about smashing mercantilism, spoke about free trade, spoke about open markets, and all of this got completely crushed the next month when coronavirus came along. And for ever since, he's been trying to sort of escape that legacy. His government has been one of high spending and indeed high taxation. Will he be able to move away from that reputation? That remains to be seen, because whilst he keeps mentioning he would like taxation to come down, we're also in parallel hearing this message that the government does not want to bring down taxation until it's sensible to do so. Of course, cutting taxes could lead to be an inflationary measure if the shortfall is met by borrowing or printing rather than cutting spending. So there are some worries with regard to cutting taxes, but there had been a huge amount of speculation as to whether or not the income tax rate cuts scheduled for 2024 might be brought forward, whether or not that corporation tax rise, a 6% rise in corporation tax scheduled for next year, will that be abandoned? Lots of questions there. I'm not sure we're going to hear the big answers on that today, though. We're going to hear the broad brushstrokes of policy to help with the cost of living, perhaps on childcare and particularly on housing too.
So obviously a lot of people want to tune in live to that right here on GBNews, whether it's on radio, online or on their TV. And what time are we expecting this then? Well,
it's a bit of a movable feast. The time has already shifted twice so far today, but at the moment we're expecting sometime after 1 o'clock.
Sometime after 1 o'clock. Now, can I just ask you as well, obviously there's no confidence, or vote of confidence, I suppose you should say, really. I'm unconvinced that Rishi Sunak will have voted for Boris Johnson. I don't know. Do you think there's a cabinet reshuffle in the offing here? Will he be looking at some members of his cabinet and thinking, actually, hang on a minute, you were given a straight choice as to whether or not you wanted me out the door, and you said yes?
This is a huge point of speculation, and there's a lot of wondering whether or not the rumour of a spreadsheet inside Number 10 is true. A spreadsheet of those who declared their public support for the Prime Minister on Monday and those who did not. Because there are some members of the government, not necessarily cabinet, but junior ministers, who did not declare that they had voted for the Prime Minister on Monday. They didn't declare that they'd voted against him, but they didn't declare that they'd voted for him. And there was a big whipping operation on Monday to get members of the government, members of the payroll vote, as it's called, to say that they'll be backing the Prime Minister publicly. Perhaps there'll be retribution for those who did not. And I suppose the other thing is there's a real tricky balance to strike when you come to a cabinet reshuffle. The one thing you do when you sack a minister is you make an enemy. And does the Prime Minister want to make more enemies now? Or does he, on the other hand, want to say, look, I'm going to reward those who were loyal to me, who stuck by me, who perhaps are not in cabinet now? We might bring some of those in who were the fervent supporters. So on the other side of the ledger, that could be a positive thing. However, a cabinet reshuffle is a big thing to do. It changes the mechanics of government. It shifts things in a big way. Does he want to do that to distract from the policy agenda right now? Probably not. Might he want to do it in the wake of potentially 2 by-election losses on the 23rd of June? That might be more of a realistic prospect.
What kind of impact do you think it would have if there are 2 by-election losses there? Because, I mean, obviously you survived this vote because confidence vote now, and that buys him a bit of time, doesn't it, really? And so will it actually have any impact? Have they already written it off?
There's 2 ways to look at this. Number one, these are Tory seats. They were one with a large majority, one with an all-right majority, but they represent 2 different voting coalitions. You've got the Red Wall seat in Wakefield in the north, held by Labour for a long time, and won by the Conservatives in the promise of Boris Johnson. His leadership represents winning over seats like Wakefield. And on the other hand, at the same time, Tiverton, down in the southwest, a seat that has been in Tory hands for quite some time, a seat that faces the Liberal Democrats, is a wealthier area, is a more well-to-do area, and one that is referred to now as the Blue Wall. These seats that are more potentially well-off and natural Conservative voters who feel potentially dismayed by Boris Johnson. Now, that's at risk to the Lib Dems. If these 2 seats fall, that could be quite a powerful representation of the collapse of the Tory voting coalition. If you're losing the wealthy South and the Red Wall, you have a problem there. However, on the other hand, we're mid-term, we're 2.5 years into a 5-year term government. You would expect the government to do poorly in by-elections, and in these 2 by-elections, you've got some pretty gruesome local factors. Right. In Wakefield, you have a former Conservative MP who was arrested and tried for child molestation.
Not
that
usually
is clearly going to have a big weighty impact on how people vote there.
So. Yeah.
And in Tiverton, of course, you have a resignation of a member of Parliament who admitted to watching pornography in the House of Commons chamber. Now, both of those 2 local factors may well play into those votes, and the Tories may well be saying that potentially these were never going to be easy ones to win. Even though they have been Tory seats that were won in 2019, the local factors may be to play here. And potentially Boris Johnson can almost explain his way out of that. The other point, I suppose, is that everyone expects that they're going to lose them. And so the expectations game can matter almost as much as the results game.